Hi, welcome back to the Trial by Jennifer podcast series. I am your host, Jennifer Butterfield, and today's guest is Rory McShane, founder of McShane LLC. Welcome, Rory. Thank you for coming and joining me on the podcast today. Tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
For sure. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. So the base of my business is government relations and public affairs. I've been in that industry for the last, decade and a half, 12 years or so. And then also have some other businesses. I own some rental properties and stuff like that. But my main business, my main income is my consulting firm.
Awesome. I feel really excited to have you, especially since right before we hit record, you were telling me how you've been on all these podcasts. And so I loved having people that are comfortable chatting. And I ask all of my guests this question. What was the conversation around personal finance like in your home growing up?
That's a great question. There was really a dichotomy. So I grew up in a split home. My mother was very financially conservative. Had was an employee all her life, pretty successfully. She worked for Sun Microsystems, which later became Oracle,
Yeah.
and made six figures many years, but still clipped coupons and saved money very aggressively. Drove a used Nissan Altima up until I bought her a car for Christmas a few years ago. Was driving the same car I used to steal when I was a teenager up until I bought her a car when I was 28. And conversely, with my father is very much the opposite. My dad was, I guess I'd say, very much financially a cowboy, saw him be somewhat successfully financially, saw him be very unsuccessful financially, had a couple of business ventures. Two of his business ventures were very successful. One of his business ventures ended up driving him to bankruptcy and home
Oh, yeah.
foreclosure and stuff like that. And so got to kind of watch both ends of that equation.
Mm-hmm. Wow, so one of the reasons why I love asking that question is because I think that I don't want to say it reveals a lot about people, but I think it's always really interesting, to get a little bit of a background, to see where people are coming from, especially, because there is so much talk about money and business on this podcast. And so I'm curious, like how did that impact you and your relationship with money, and what did that look like, once you started to kind of, become responsible for yourself, and how did that evolve?
Sure. So I spent the first lot of years of my life not financially responsible at all, right?
Mhm.
Up until I want to say 2017 timeframe, I was fortunate to have a fairly good career and excel in my field, and be making good money. I mean, in 2016, 17, I was making 60, 70, $80,000 a year, and I was constantly broke. Bank accounts always overdrawn, credit cards always maxed out, always behind on bills, right? And right around that time frame was when was my son was born, and stuff started to change for me, and I started to see money as have it. I guess the way I put it is have a different level of respect for money, right? Money up until that point was, it was fun. It was, I'm going out to eat every night of the week, but I'm broke and my credit cards are maxed out, right? And
Right.
that brought some big changes for me that time frame.
Yeah. Well, so I don't imagine that you have maxed out credit cards currently.
I do not.
Tell me a little bit about what it looks like I mean, it seems like there's been some kind of a change
Yeah. So
with your relationship with money. And I know that there are probably quite a few people, whether they blame the economy or not, that are struggling financially right now. And, I think a lot of people who are in the millennial generation are like, the purchasing power today, just wasn't what it was like 40 years ago or even 20 years ago. And so, I hear you talking a little bit about some of these lifestyle habits, like going out to eat every night, or just living life in maybe a different way than what it might look like for you today. And so, what happened? Like, what changed?
that's a great question. So at a certain point, it was really the summer. I'll tell you exactly what happened. It was the summer of 2017, and I had just bought, and I'd really started to buckle down financially, and I started paying off credit cards, then what happened was I had the state of Indiana decided it was time for me to make some amends to them, and they decided that sometimes quickly, and by quickly they meant right now, that it was time for to make some amends. So they seized my bank accounts for some unpaid taxes that I'd had that I didn't remember about. It was probably only a
Oh,
couple $1,000s, but that's about all I had, right?
yeah,
I just bought my first house. My son was just born. I just gotten custody of him. My first fiance and I were living together, and all I had in the world was $2,000 in a safe. Right, so I'm supporting
yeah,
three people, and I've got $2,000 in a safe. And that experience, that if I didn't find some way to make money real quick, all three of us were going to be, we're going to be homeless, right? And that kind
right,
of changed my relationship with money, and I started to adopt a cash is king policy, right? I don't, since that time, I've not carried any credit card debt. I use credit cards out of convenience. I pay them off all in full at the end of every month. I don't, around that time, I paid off my first vehicle. I don't finance vehicles, right? I pay for my vehicles in cash. Anything with wheels on it is a depreciating asset, meaning any loan you're going to get on it is a chattel loan, right? Meaning the value of the
Mhm.
asset decreases faster than you could pay off the note on it.
Yeah. The minute you drive it off the lot.
The minute you drive, I don't. I have never bought. I have a decently significant net worth, and I've never bought a brand new car in my life. I buy cars that are a year, 2 years old. And I'll tell you what happens is that emotionally changes your relationship with money. And I've had other times in business where I've had a bad emotional relationship with money and spent way too much money. But then normally, if I can come back to center a little bit, I can fix it. I bought myself a year ago. I bought myself a big honking $80,000 truck. I mean that thing just makes you feel like more of a man the second you get up behind the wheel. And I got to a point a couple of months ago where I was like, I don't need this, and it does. I don't use it for any truck things, right? I hold an office chair to my office one time. I'm going to sell this. I'm
Right,
going to sell this. I'm going to take the cash, and I'm going to buy I drive a nice SUV, paid off in cash. It's not brand new, and it's not an Escalade.
right. I love it. Well, and I think so what I'm hearing you say, the mentality of it, is like living within your means, number one. And then also, if you can't afford it, don't buy it. And I think there's this big thing around what it actually means to afford something because
Right.
so many people, I mean, credit or debt, consumer debt just hit, I think, $1 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like a mix between, medical debt, student loan debt, high interest rate credit card debt. But I mean, there obviously seems to be like a problem in this country around instant gratification.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that it requires a certain level of discipline to either hunker down if you're not going to increase your income, right? And I mean, hopefully you do. Hopefully that's the route that you take because I think that that's so much easier to do is just increasing income. But I think I've met people who retire millionaires that have lived on a 45 $1,000 salary most of their lives, and it was just a matter of living within their means. So I love the cash is king
And Jen, real quick, Jen,
philosophy. I
I would even go a little further with that because you're positing it as two options. Option one is live within your means. Option two is increase your income. I would actually argue that you have to make option one an emotional habit and priority for you, even if you are able to do option two. And I've kind of just learned this lesson recently. I had a couple of extremely successful years in business. Made enough money to put me well into the top 1% of Americans for several years, right? And this last year was a financial struggle, right? Now I still made, six figures and a very comfortable amount of money. But the problem is that when your income level is here and your expense level is here because you're used to making enough money to just cover all your expenses and not have a question about it, and that or
yeah.
sorry, and then the income level drops to here, it's much harder to ratchet down that expense level, right? I mean, the people that I see are the most successful are the ones whose expense levels never really reach this point.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because um this is something I talk about a lot, and some of the content I produce. It's known. I didn't know it was called this up until just recently, probably like within the past year and a half. But lifestyle creep, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like as soon as they get the raise, as soon as there's a little bit of extra money in the bank, right? And I think you and I probably can relate that maybe in some form or fashion within our lifetime, we've fallen prey to this
Mm-hmm.
same idea of like, okay, got to get a nicer house, a nicer car,
Mm-hmm.
go shopping, get a new wardrobe, or like whatever it is, And I think that it gets people in a lot of trouble, especially in the tech industry, because you see so many people get these really high paying jobs in tech right out of college. They advance in their career. And the thing with these tech companies in their sales team specifically is they'll hire a whole like army of people and then they'll start cutting people if they're not making their quotas. And so you
Yep.
see these mass tech layoffs like every, I don't know, 6 months or so. And it's becoming more and more common. And I think not only is that poor managerial oversight, but it's also in the sense like um, I empathize with these like Gen Zers who are going through this. Well, now I have to live my life on credit, and it's a really easy way to get in hot water. So that raises a really good point. And thank you for bringing that up. And, I want to kind of pivot into because I love data and analytics. And I know a lot of what you do in your company is related around data driven results. And so I want to talk a little bit about you starting your business. How did that get started and how has it evolved? Because I
Sure.
know there are a lot of like budding entrepreneurs that listen to the podcast as
Sure,
well.
sure.
So.
So I'll try and give you kind of the 30-second version, the quick highlight if I can. So I've been in my industry, the government relations industry, the public affairs industry. Oh gosh, for 12 or so years. Early in life, I had a couple of, I worked construction for a little bit. I worked in a window factory for a little bit. But I've been in this industry for a long time and kind of moved up the ranks of the industry and started working for other firms in the industry. And the last firm I was with in 2017 had fired me, and it was very amicable separation. They wanted me here in Austin, Texas. I needed to be back in Las Vegas for a while because my son had just been born there, and it was very amicable separation. And basically, there wasn't really anybody who wanted to hire me, right? So, the word consulting really means unemployed. And I just decided one day, screw this. I'm going to see if I can do this myself. And I'd actually done it several times in the past and failed at it. And I took the shot. And the first office of the company was my garage at the first house I ever owned in the ghetto in Las Vegas. And there were three of us, or there were two of us in the beginning, and then shortly thereafter, three of us working out of the garage. And shortly after that, we moved to a little terrible office down by the airport in Las Vegas. It smelled like urine. The whole office wasn't even as big as probably my living room now. And 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 I'll tell you, Jennifer, what really did it. I was talking to some of my employees about this the other day. What really did it is we had just a hunger and a passion. And I mean, for the first 3 years of the company, I probably worked 16 hours a day. I mean, I basically looked at it as the daytime is my time to make sales and acquire new clients, and the nighttime is my time to work on the things I've sold, right? And about a year into the business, just about a year into the business, we brought on a team. We brought on a managing director who'd had some business experience, Ed Williams. We brought on a sales vice president, Woodrow Johnston, and we had very little money. Our managing director, who'd previously been accustomed to making $250,000 a year salaries, signed on for $30,000 a year and
Wow.
10% of the company's profits because he believed that we could
Wow.
grow this thing. And my first
Wow.
sales guy, I think he made $400 a week plus like a really good commission, 40% commission or something like that, right? But the three of us, man, I mean, we just grew this thing, and we all worked incredibly hard, and we just refused failure. And the way you refuse failure is you be very comfortable with people saying you're not going to make it, and people talking crap about you, and you just be there anyways, and you just out hustle everyone else. And that's what I tell every young guy who starts a business: is you can't be in it for the money, because you're not going to see any of it for a couple of years. You have to love what you do. And when I think I was just, both of those gentlemen, one of them is still a senior advisor for our firm. The other one's left and started his own company. And we were reminiscing the other day, and we were talking about, we were going to pitch some potential client in California. And, I'm sorry, no, we were going to pitch a client in New York, and we'd gotten the potential client on the phone, and they said, well, I'm talking to a lot of other companies, they're going to come meet with me next week. And we said, next week? You can't wait till next week. You got to make a decision tomorrow. We can be there tomorrow. And it's Halloween night. We're in Las Vegas. So I take my son trick or treating. I drop him off at my mom's. I meet Woodrow, who's my VP, at the airport. We take a red-eye flight from Las Vegas to New York, Halloween night, and we got the last two tickets on the airplane. So we're in the very last row of the plane, and I'm a fat guy, right? And he's a big guy. And then there's a guy in the row with us who's at least one and a half of me, and we're all just
Oh my God.
on a 6-hour flight. We get to New York City at 7:00 in the morning. We get some coffee, put on our suits, and we go sign the deal. And we're sitting at this diner waiting to fly back out. Our whole time in New York City was less than 12 hours. But man, there's no feeling in the world like that. And then of course there were 100 of these trips where we didn't sign the client, and we were depressed together, and we were on a cloud nine together. But that feeling when you've got that tight team of guys creating a business and building a business together, I mean, it's really irreplaceable.
Oh, I love that story. I just think that is, I feel like I'm like on the edge of my seat listening to it. But yeah, I mean, wow. I think there's a lot to be said for, and I had a guest come on last month who kind of shared like a similar sentiment, because I do things, I'm an individual, right? And then, but they were telling me, they've run this successful construction company for, I think like 17 years or something, or been in the business. And the sentiment I'm getting from both of you actually is that your company is really some of the most important assets in the company. And so I just love the spirit of determination. I think that leads really nicely into the next question, because I know you take like a charge the hill mentality with this approach to business, and I'm curious, like, how do you feel like that this has contributed, this mindset, to the growth and success of McShane LLC?
It's a great question. So I would say a couple fold. One, you have to differentiate yourself from your competitors, right? So when we started in this industry, and we were very fortunate, 2 years in a row, we were the fastest growing company of our type in our industry. We were recognized by Inc. magazine 2 years in a row, and as being part of the top 5,000 fastest growing companies in America, and the second time the fastest growing in our industry. So one, it's a differentiator from our client, right? From our competition. We're the new kids on the block. We're comparatively young, right? So how do we set ourselves apart? We be the guys who are willing to be the most aggressive and the most charged. But second, it's an internal culture question, right? So I'll give you another example. I was out in Las Vegas last week. My headquarters is in Las Vegas. I've got a couple of employees here in Austin, several more in Las Vegas. And we had a presentation to give to a client. Now, I don't want to say this, I'm worried the client will see it, but we had a presentation to give to a client on Friday morning. And around Thursday afternoon, I take a look at the presentation, and I was just not satisfied with it. It was not the quality product I wanted to deliver to the client. I didn't think it did justice to what they were paying for and what they were looking for. So I made them rewrite the whole presentation, redo all the math, and we worked from Friday from Thursday at 5 until 5 a.m. 12 till
Wow.
5 a.m. Friday morning, to get this thing in really tip top shape and deliver a great product to the client 9 a.m. Friday morning. Um,
Mhm.
and if you're going to tell your guys to do that, you got to be willing to do it with them, right? So I'm there in the office
Mhm.
with a couple of my key guys for 12 hours all through the night, getting this thing done. And but I'll tell you what happened. Gosh, it was so much fun. I mean, we're doing this work and we're telling stories and we're telling jokes. And at one point, I fall out of my chair laughing. I mean, it was just it was honestly sitting in this office, eating Domino's pizza, drinking Red Bull, getting this work done. Most fun I've had in months. So you have to love it. You have to love what you do, and you have to love running up the hill, even knowing that you're going to get knocked down sometimes.
I love that. And I think, first of all, you paint really nice pictures. So it's
Mhm.
really easy to imagine that happening. But what dedication? I don't know if any other firms that I know of, and, I talk to quite a few people, have that same level of dedication to excellence with their clients. I think a lot of people in that situation would say, it's not our best, but it'll do,
Mhm.
right? And I think that there's a lot I can say for that, but I think there's a lot of that same type of attitude towards things these days, and I think that it really does make the difference. So great story, and I'm curious, what do you think are some of like the biggest challenges that you faced scaling? I mean, I know growing a company, and maybe it would help to preface like you have quite a few employees.
Mhm.
I mean, for the time that you've been doing this and the scaling that you've done, I would say it's quite impressive. And I'm curious, I can't imagine that didn't come with like a few hiccups or like
Oh
different
my
things
gosh.
that you're like, I don't know how we're gonna do this, but can you talk a
So
little bit about that?
sure, I've been a victim of or not a victim, a self-inflicted victim of too little growth and too much growth. I've been on both sides of
Mhm.
that equation, right? I've been the guy who doesn't want to grow and doesn't want to hire more employees because that's going to cut into my cash and that's going to cut into my profit number and all that kind of stuff, right? And lost clients and seen a lack of success from that. And I've also been the guy who's let his ego drive his business, right? And where it stops becoming about being a good product and it becomes about being the biggest and the best and the we for a lot of years, and don't get me wrong, these were a lot of fun, but I mean we hosted these parties in DC every Christmas that I was spending $25,000 on. I joke I've paid for far more booze sober than I ever paid for when I drank.
Yeah.
And having to have the staff to grow and feed that machine. We've cut about a third of our staff from when we were at our highest point, because I made some irresponsible growth decisions, right? Out of the
Mhm.
desire to be the biggest and the best. What I would say though is, as a general rule, a couple things: you can never ever replace yourself, which means you at least in my experience, as the owner of the business, you always have to be willing to carry the heavy end. One of my father's relatively successful ventures, he owned a moving company, and in the early days of the company, he was out there moving the furniture with the guys, and he told me, "You always carry the heavy end. If you own the company, if your name's on the truck, you always carry the heavy end. You always show up first to load the trucks when they so they're and one of the things that I tried to do at one point was hire an executive team and kind of step away. You can't do that, right? You can't expect anybody who works at a company that has your name on the door to work harder than you'll work, no matter how much you pay them. And I have some executives who are paid pretty
Mhm.
well. So that's the first piece of it. No one will love it like you love it, right? The
Yeah.
second piece of it is you have to be okay with conflict, right? At a certain point, I mean, as a business since our inception, we've done something like $30 million, right? Like, and granted that's over a number of
Wow.
years, but you have to be okay with the fact that you're going to get sued, you're going to have to sue people, employees are going to have problems with other employees, and your job is to kind of is as best as you can to be unaffected by it, right? Just this is the cost of doing business.
Mhm.
This is what happens. Sometimes people are going to be mad. Sometimes employees are going to be mad. Clients are going to be mad. People are going to quit. People are going to, it's part of what happens, and you got to go and you got to roll with the flow on it, and you got to let yourself off the hook for bad decisions you make, right, and try not to make them again. Any aspiring
Mm.
businessman has made plenty of gambles that haven't worked out, and I've certainly done plenty myself.
I think that's so important. And, I did quite a bit of a study in school on the Israeli culture. And, not to get into anything political, but I had a professor who was from Israel, and he served in the army on the
Mhm.
conscription, and ended up going to Tel Aviv. And he had us read this book called Startup Nation. And one of the main reasons why Israel is so successful when it comes to like the tech industry and innovation and growth is because they value failure. And
Mhm.
it's not seen as this thing of like, oh, we need to be ashamed of this. We need to push it aside, pretend like it didn't happen, cover it up, or whatever it is. And I think that has a tendency to be more of the culture in America for whatever reason. But they value failure, and you think about it. I mean, an 18-year-old graduating from high school, they immediately have to go and serve 2 years in
Mhm.
the army, and what they're doing is you know, protecting their squadron of people. It's like it's life or death, And with that mentality, they come out of the forces, and of course they're going to be suited to manage people.
Mhm.
I mean, this is very different than a 20-year-old here in college in America, but I think there's something so valuable in this idea of valuing the mistakes that we make, and seeing it as part of the growth and the journey. And I mean, I don't think any success I've achieved has ever come from not trying it several other different ways, if not many different ways, and those things not working out. It's very rare that I think people get it on the first try. And I love that you brought up a part of that, which
Mhm.
is like being willing to have conflict and like to keep going, and don't let these like negative experiences or challenges or difficulties stop the work.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. It brings
It's
up
a
a really good point.
Momentum
Go
is
ahead.
the most crucial thing in business, right? You're going to get knocked to the curb, right? But if you have, and that's why I said
Mhm.
team is so important, because if you have a good core team that's pushing you to go forward and pushing you in the right direction, then losing that momentum becomes difficult. Right. But if it's just you by yourself and you lose that momentum, you're in that place where you got knocked on your butt and all you want to do is lay in bed the next day. Right. And you can't do that. So
Right.
I mean, failure happens. It happens to all of us. I've failed in many business enterprises. I've had many other ones that were very successful, and and being okay with that it's just a crucial piece of this whole thing.
Right. And it kind of reminds me of that saying, and maybe somebody said this to you a lot when you were younger, but like always end on a high note, like never walk away from the table or never end the day with like, a low shot or
Mhm.
something, and I think with that kind of mentality, it really does usher in continued momentum.
Mhm.
So good point. I obviously want to talk a little bit about data. I'm getting a
Sure.
degree in business analytics, so I work a
Mhm.
lot with data science and have developed, an understanding of a lot of these different tools and how incredibly oh man, there's so much to say, but when it comes to efficiency and driving bottom line profit, driving results, and um, the technology that we have today, I mean, even if it's just the ability to interpret data and
Mhm.
analyze data in different ways. So I know that you use data a lot in your company's strategy. And how would you say that these strategies have informed the results that the company has achieved? And what kind of tools do you guys use for
So
these?
So I want to caveat real quick and create a separation between data that we use for our customers and them achieving their goal and data that we use
Mhm.
internally to make decisions. So as a consulting and by and large
Yeah.
a marketing firm, we are huge believers in big data, right? There's about 220 data fields available on every single consumer. How often you go to Starbucks, that is data that I can buy. Do you have pets? That's data I can buy. Do you shop at Walmart or
Wow.
do you buy name brands? That's data that I can buy. I'm a Walmart guy who wears a Rolex, so I think I kind of broke their algorithm a little bit. Like they weren't sure whether to send me ads for get the 99-cent deal at Walmart or go buy a new Rolex. Um, what was I going to say? So what we try to do is I always tell customers, if you want to sell Coca-Cola, we're the wrong guys to hire because anyone is a potential customer for Coca-Cola, right? If you want to figure out how to get the most contact with the greatest amount of people for the lowest cost possible, we're not the right guys to hire. But if you want to sell a product or a service or an idea or a candidate that where you have a very finite target group. So one of our largest clients for a long time was a medical device company based in Redmond, Washington. Sold a very expensive product that was a wonderful product for internologists, right? To help them diagnose internal medical problems. It was a very
Wow.
expensive product, and they weren't interested in targeting everyone in the medical profession or every doctor in America. They were interested in targeting a very, very select number of people, right? So we were able to use our data to find these people, to find their social media accounts, their mobile device ID numbers, their Wi-Fi router devices, their subscriptions to
Wow.
Hulu, Sling, Vudu, all of the other online television services, and surround these few targeted people with advertising. Right. So that's what we do. We bring big data down to the actionable level. Right. Now to talk
Wow.
about, and it's funny because I'm very, very good at that and very good at helping our customers achieve results in that way. When it comes to using data for my own business, I'm terrible at it. I'm a gut player. I will I'll keep somebody or let them go based on if I like them, what kind of vibe do I get from them, stuff like that. So it's important to have someone to counterbalance that. For a lot of years, our managing director Ed Williams was the counterbalance to that for me, and he would bring me reports and be like, there is no reason for you to keep hosting your $20,000 DC parties other than you like it and it's fun for you, right? Which it is, and I might do it again one day. But like I mean, be like, we've never gotten enough sales, enough new clients from these parties to even cover the cost of the party. Right. Or I'll
Right.
give you another one. We had an office in DC for a while. We shut that down a couple of years ago. It was our DC real estate's incredibly expensive. It was our most expensive office. And
Right.
he's like 80% of the meetings we're doing in DC, we're not even doing at this office. It is our
Yeah.
least profitable office. We got to close it down. Or you know what, this salesman, or I've had employees where maybe they rub me the wrong way because their mentality isn't like mine. But then they'll bring me
Right.
reports and say, hey, he has his own style, but he's profitable. Right. Versus Rory, you like this guy because he's kind of your kind of guy, but he's super unprofitable. You're just paying this guy to hang out with him. Right. So you
Right.
got, if you're not a data guy by nature, right, you got to have someone in the business who can always bring everything back to actionable data.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I also loved hearing about the insights of how you provide data to your clients. I'm like, that is brilliant. I mean, to have the access to that. And I mean, I love hearing about the niche. And I mean, niche is so important when you are really serving a client in the highest way. I think, I mean, that's something that I've really started to focus on developing with my own business, specifically with media around targeting the right audience, because it's like, it's not going to hit home if you're putting it in front of people that it has absolutely no relevance
Mm-hmm.
to. And so I think that raises a really, really great point. And I love hearing about the inside banter between you and the people that work with you. And it's just been really neat to have you. And I want to kind of on the round out of the episode ask you, like I said, I think there are quite a few people that are beginning their own ventures that are listening today, and I'm curious, what do you think would be like the single most important principle that has guided your success in business?
Hard work. Get Somebody said this to me once. Wonderful guy by the name of Zach Condry. He was one of my first bosses in my industry. He said, any room you walk into, there's going to be somebody smarter than you. You can't control that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a genetic lottery. There's going to be somebody better looking than you. For me, that's most of the room normally. There's going to be somebody that comes from a better background with more connections than you. You can't control that. The only factor you can control is being the hardest working person in the room. That is the only thing under your control, and you have to control that every time.
Wow. I've actually never heard that, and I love it. And it really speaks to, I think, what a lot of people experience without many of them ever putting words to it. I mean, it speaks to the insecurity of, like, I mean, walking into a room, and all of those things are true. At least I would hope there's at least one person that's smarter than me in the room. I mean, there's got to be at least a handful. And those are the rooms that I really want to be in. But I so love the determination, the grit, the principle of hard work. Rory, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today to talk about your experience and share just a wealth of knowledge and wisdom from what you've been doing the past over a decade. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and for those of you listening, next week I'm gonna actually having guest Terry Lassiter back on the show for round 2, and she is bringing her business partner Shannon, and I can't wait to interview them. It will be our first episode where there will be 3 of us, so I'm really looking forward to that. And they're really focused on female empowerment and women in business right now, so stay tuned for that Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central Time, and I will see you all next week.